Welcome to the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. Every week, you'll hear strategies for building your online service-based business your way. And now, here's your host, veteran freelancer, author, and TEDx speaker, Laura Briggs.
Welcome back. It is time for episode 87 of the Advanced Freelancing Podcast and talk about a clickbait-worthy title. I am still freelancing, but I'm just not freelancing full-time anymore. And I want to talk to you about how I came to that decision. And if you know me, you know I love doing batch work. So if you're listening to this episode, know that I have recorded several podcast episodes at the same time, all with the content previously outlined that I did in another work session of batching work. So I really do practice what I preach when it comes to batching your work and splitting things up. It is so much easier for me to record 2 or 3 podcast episodes at a time, and it definitely makes it easier on everyone else when producing them. So think about how that concept of batch work could play into your freelance business as well. So the title of this episode is Why I'm Not Freelancing Full-Time Anymore. If you have followed my story for a long time or listened to this podcast, you know that I have been freelancing full-time since the summer of 2013. So that is a full 6 years of working full-time, many of those putting in a lot of hours, especially at the beginning, to get things off the ground. And it's part of the reason that I've been incorporating a couple different interviews with people who have taken less traditional freelance paths into the mix with some of these podcast episodes, because I'm seeing it not just with me, but with many of my private coaching clients as well. For some of them, freelancing full-time is the dream. Like, this is what they've worked for. They love it. They're happy to do it. For others, it's interesting because they will start coaching with me for the purpose of scaling their freelance business. And in the process of working together, realize that's not actually what they want, at least anymore. For some of them, that means intentionally scaling back their freelance business altogether. And that can be a little bit surprising for people who have put in so much effort to build up a freelance side hustle, potentially even leaving their day job. And what I want to emphasize here is that you always have the opportunity to change and adjust your business and your life as a freelancer, as a creative, as a person, as much as you want, because there's different seasons in life. There's seasons in life where you may be focused on other things like taking care of an elderly parent, or perhaps you're a new parent yourself and the focus of your life has really shifted from that all hustle, all in mentality towards being a new parent, or maybe you've just moved in with your significant other, or whatever it might be. Well, one of these life changes and shifts that I'm seeing happen a lot is people who build their freelance business up and then go, okay, what's next? And I honestly can speak to that from experience, because for me, I've loved being a freelancer. I've loved doing it full time. And there just hit a point when I wasn't sure that that was the fit for me anymore. And I've taken a lot of care and a lot of work to adjust my business in light of that. So I started seeing the signs that it was time to change. In early 2019, I was really set up for a big year freelance wise. I took on 2 enormous freelance contracts. I was like, this is easily going to be my biggest year yet with freelancing. And I did those for about 3 months. And then both of those projects came to an end for different reasons, none that were negative or anything. But I was kind of relieved. Like, normally when I lose a contract or a client, I'm like, oh, I got to go replace this client. I've got to go find, another situation that's going to fill this time. I started feeling relief at letting go some of those projects and intentionally not replacing them. So those 2 contracts ending in around the May time period, and I was getting really close to my book launch too. We were getting ready to move. It really started to feel like the perfect storm situation where if I was going to scale my freelance business down, then was the time to start. And it really was. And to be honest with you, having so many contracts and so many irons in the fire, it took me a full 4 months to intentionally scale my business back. It was by no means an overnight process, right? So there were a lot of signs that it was time to change. From those contracts ending, one of those clients randomly decided that they were paying writers too much and wanted to cut their prices and rates by 50%. So all of a sudden it was like, wow, what a weird conversation. Like, they're not complaining that anything's been done wrong, but they want to pay all three of us freelance writers working for them across the board, like much less. So we also went on vacation in May. It was a very like healing and transformative vacation. We took my sister-in-law and my husband and I, we were all over Europe. One of my clients that I've been with for years, when I emailed them to say I wanted to cut my workload in half with them doing some of the editing work and still stay on with the writing work, I kind of realized that when I came back from vacation, I didn't want to start doing the editing again. So I sort of revised my original statement and said like, can you just pull me out of this altogether? Right. So I gave up a good portion of income in order to do that, but it felt like the right decision. And it really was. And if you've never written and published a book before, whether that's self-published or traditionally published, there was so much work that went into that behind the scenes. And the book was launched on July 16th. And I wanted to support it as much as possible because I knew I would not only set myself up for success with this first publication, but I was very intentional when I brought on an agent in 2018 that I wanted to write multiple books. And even she stressed to me in our early conversations that the opportunities for future books would very much be based on what I could pull off with the first one. So I felt like the door of opportunity was knocking. I had to take it. I really did not want this book launch to fall apart for any reason. So I had put together a marketing plan that I created over the course of 4 months. I implemented that marketing plan over about 6 to 7 months. I had brought in an additional VA to help me with that. I hired a publicist to help me with that. I rebooted my podcast, right? There were so many things going on in connection with the book, and not one of them do I regret, right? But because I made that decision, I had to scale back other things in my business. I also started to feel like I just wasn't seeing the room for growth for me with freelance writing. There was not another form of freelance writing that was exciting me at the time. I kind of started dipping my toes into the water with public speaking, doing some workshops. I also expanded my freelance coaching business because I started to realize that I really did not want to be writing 8 to 9 hours a day. And there is an excellent video. We will link it in the show notes. It is like the motto of 2019 for me. It's an interview with Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, and multiple other books. I strongly recommend her book, Big Magic, if you haven't checked it out. But she talks about the difference between a hobby, a job, a career, and a vocation. And so she talks about the fact that writing will always be her vocation, even if it is not her career. And she talks about all the other jobs she's held where she wasn't writing, but it gave her the mental space to be a writer outside of those hours. So for me, delving into nonfiction, into fiction, into doing public speaking, into coaching, like all of those to some extent involve additional writing, right? And I was also getting pressure to finish up my PhD, talk about a massive writing project, writing a doctoral dissertation. I could see the writing on the wall that at the rate that I was going with the volume of clients that I had, I could not do all of these other writing projects and also be writing, 6 to 9 hours a day for clients. So I actually had my best freelance month ever in 2019, nearly 30K in freelance income. And I also had my worst freelance month in recent years in August. So I believe that the best one was April, and then August was my worst month that I've had in years, in terms of income wise, right? But in terms of how I felt about things and how intentional I was in the way that my business looked, I kind of view it like the opposite, right? Because I had this huge month in April and then I went on vacation, and honestly, I was starting to get burned out. I could really sense that I was experiencing the early signs of burnout and knew that that was going to be a problem for me. So I went from that best freelance month ever to saying, okay, is this it? Like, I had a great freelance month. I don't necessarily feel like from a 10K month to a 30K month, like there wasn't like more happiness or peacefulness. I honestly feel kind of tired, a little bit burned out. So for me, this is not the direction that I want my business to grow. So freelance income, as you know, can fluctuate, and it's also up to you to decide if consistency or other options are more appropriate. There's seasons in your freelance business. There's been seasons where I've outsourced all my writing work. There have been seasons where I did not advertise my coaching practice at all because it was completely booked through word of mouth. There have been seasons where I've said, we are not filming YouTube videos for 4 months, or I'm taking a 1.5 year break from my podcast, right? Things are always in flux. So in other businesses, it's harder to adjust your business to your life, but that is not the case with freelancing because it can open other doors. And some other doors started to open as soon as I started to intentionally scale down my freelance business. Now, I was having a conversation about this in my freelancing group, which you can check out. It's Mastering Your Freelance Life with Laura. And this idea came up of, like, when you have filled your schedule with other things, in a way you can actually be limiting yourself from better opportunities or the opportunities that you want. So people might go, well, how does that make sense? I feel like if there's something in the back of your mind that is calling on you to do, say it's writing a book, or say it's opening another business entirely, but you fill your schedule with what comes easily to you, which could be bringing on freelance contracts, you're kind of denying a part of yourself, and you're actually limiting your personal and your business growth. I've said this a lot, and sometimes people won't agree with me, but I don't believe that it is all about the money. Because if you bring in great money, but you don't feel lit up, or you start to feel like what I did, which was just like, I needed to complete my projects because I was on deadline, but I had several clients where I was not excited to work on their projects at all. I was really just doing it to get things done because I had made a commitment to work for that client. And I realized like how dangerous that was to, like, I'm not doing the best thing for me. I'm not doing the best thing for my clients. So I did a very careful inventory of all of my clients on my current roster and said, what can I change? And how can I make this more in line with where I want to go? Now, it's hard to say no to a really good thing. I'm so grateful for my business, but writing is not something I want to do 40 hours anymore. And it's actually a gift to have been a writer for full-time for the last 6 years, because I've been able to expand into other skill sets, selling courses, doing project and content management for clients, which requires more communication skills than writing, doing public speaking and coaching and all these kinds of things, writing books, doing TEDx talks. It's opened other doors and made me see that this is not all that I am limited to. So rather than feeling like I've taken it as far as I can take it and let's just wake up every day and do the same thing over again, I started looking for new challenges. So how do you tell when it's really the right time to move on or to make a big decision about what's next for you? Mindset work is key. I have done more mindset work in the last 6 months than probably the entirety of all of my life before that. For you, mindset work might look like prayer, sitting there quietly, journaling, doing meditation every day, bringing up new hobbies. All of it helps you to honor your purpose. As a freelancer, we are hearing communication and thoughts and ideas daily. Your business can easily overtake your brain because it is something that you cannot really shut off and confine to, say, an office, right? It's usually your entire home. When you're out running or exercising or doing errands, you're thinking about your business. And so there's a lot of noise, and it's very hard sometimes to honor your purpose when there's so much noise coming at you from so many different directions. So being intentionally quiet, sitting down and making that effort to learn more about what it is you really want to do and what your next step is, can allow you to hear some of that inner intuition, or even if you're doing this through prayer, hearing from the spiritual portion of your life, getting some wisdom about what steps to take next. That was critical for me. I had filled my business with so much noise and interference that I could not tell what it was I wanted to do anymore. I had a whole bunch of obligations, and maybe only about 65 to 70% of them were things that I wanted to do. And so I had to start really honoring that and start exploring new avenues. And the minute that I started that process, which was super messy and took me the entire summer and is still ongoing, I started to see other doors opening. I got some wisdom and intuition about what my next steps were. And as we humans tend to do, initially resisted it. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That's not the next step for me. Like, no way, right? But starting to pursue these different routes was really helpful for me to start thinking about what I want my business and life to look like going forward and how I can continue to change things and allow this to evolve. So just because you've built something to the point where it's successful, it's doing well financially, that doesn't always mean that that is your end point, right? Many of the most successful business owners and freelancers that I know are evolving. They are not afraid to say, okay, I did this. It was great. Now it's time to move on. I have a new dream, or I have this other dream in the back of my mind that I've always wanted to do, and now I'm going to launch it. I think as creatives, a lot of us are called to freelancing because we want to do something creative. But when that becomes our job, 8 to 9 hours a day, being creative for other clients, it's really hard to apply that same level of creativity to our own projects. So for me, some of the best writing and side hustling I ever did was the year that I ran my business as a side hustle while I had a full-time job, because I had to be very specific about what I did in my off hours. And a lot of my job was very menial. I mean, to that extent, it was boring, but I also didn't have to do a lot of heavy lifting with my brain during the day. So I still had that creativity and excitement to come home with. And as a writer and a business owner and freelancer, you play multiple different roles. So you're the CEO, you're the VP of marketing and management and hiring and human resources, and you're the CTO, you're the chief, financial officer. You're everything. Even when you have a VA or a couple of people on your team, you are still making a massive amount of decisions, right? And so that might not be right for everyone running your business at that level. So for me, a lot of the guidance that I got was to scale my freelance clients down to 10 hours a week. And it was so awkward and weird to do this, to turn people down, to fire clients after test projects when I couldn't see how they fit into my new 10-hour a week model, to allow contracts to come to a natural end and to not try to replace them or to try to, talk the client into continuing to work with me. It was weird because I'd never really done that purposefully before. All of my previous goals in my business were very much financially based. And I found that honestly, that got very empty for me because it was like, oh, great. Like we had a good month, but like I didn't feel like my purpose and my passion was coming through at the level that the money was, if that makes sense. So it was something where I was like, okay, if I want to have a bigger impact, if I really want to help people, and that's always been something that's important for me. Like it's why I tried to pursue a career in teaching first. It's why I love coaching. I really felt that I needed to change some things about the freelance side of my business to make that happen. So my first recommendation for you is get quiet. Do the mindset work. Do it every day, 1 to 2 hours a day if you can. I spent so much time walking, journaling, talking things out with my husband, with my mom, with other people in my life where I'm like, okay, if I'm going to change this, what is this going to look like? I did a talk a couple of weeks ago, very similar to this topic. I was at my alma mater in Virginia, and I talked about the power of the pivot. So a lot of times we ignore signs from our body that it's time to move on when something no longer fits you in the way that it's currently structured. So for me, I will probably always freelance. But for me, I was able to, scale my business down to still be a 6-figure writing business, but only about 10 hours a week by being very picky about the clients that I do have. So you have 3 main options available to you when you recognize that freelancing isn't a fit. You can scale it down and find a new side hustle or full-time gig. You can find a new full-time position and phase it out entirely, or you could start a new business and go in a totally new direction and let freelancing bridge the gap for you. So maybe you want to launch your own company, you want to write a book, you want to get a whole new job, but you know that that's not something you can do tomorrow. So maybe over 6 to 12 months, freelancing is your bridge the gap. You're taking on a couple of projects to float you financially. I love the idea when you're pivoting to take baby steps towards your next purposes. For me, I didn't know what direction I wanted to go in yet. Like I did public speaking, and I knew just from speaking to some experts and doing some of it already, I did not want that to be my new full-time income. I talked to a very savvy public speaker coach several months ago, and she's like, yeah, I spend over 200 nights a year in a hotel room. And that one sentence was like, yep, this isn't for me. Like, I know there's a need for more great executive and female public speakers and motivational speakers out there. I don't want to give up. Like, that just felt like it would be trading freelancing full time for doing something that would be even more stressful and require more travel. So I knew some of what I didn't want to do, at least full time, but I didn't know which direction I wanted to go entirely. But I knew what the signs were. I was not motivated to get projects done. You know, I've coped with varying levels of anxiety my entire life. And for a long time when I was a child, I mean, all the way through graduate school, I was diagnosed with ADD. I was medicated for ADD. It was a real struggle for me to stay focused and organized. Sometimes people who meet me today are surprised to hear that. They think I'm hyper organized. That is a coping mechanism I developed from years of living with severe ADD. So when I start to notice my ADD coming back and my anxiety bubbling up every day, I start to notice symptoms like headaches, ulcers, feeling tired more often. That's usually how my body tells me it's time to go. My body actually started to shut down when I was teaching in Baltimore City. And that was the leave point for me to recognize that it was really serious and I needed to step out of that particular job. So I always watch for those types of things: missing deadlines, making mistakes with your clients, not feeling excited about getting on sales calls or turning things in, hitting a major milestone like having a huge month or bringing on a huge client, and it's much more anticlimactic than you thought. Those are all signs that it's time to take a baby step towards your next purpose. On that note, I strongly recommend the Audible-only book, Take Control of Your Life, with Mel Robbins. The very first case study she does is with a phys ed teacher who wants to do something in the wine business, but he doesn't know what yet. And he's essentially paralyzed by all of the choices. She talks about Lego blocks and building blocks that move you towards what your purpose is when you're not sure what it is. So you take little baby steps to try things out. Well, maybe you have dinner with someone, maybe you reach out to people. For me, I reached out heavily to my military spouse community and all of the networks that I had there to say, hey, like, I'm thinking about changing things up. What advice do you all have? Leaning on other people can be very, very helpful. So check out those books and resources to learn more. You can also add in more exposure, income, and opportunities by doing other things in your freelance business, starting a nonprofit, volunteering some of your free time, developing another business entirely, coaching other people, either as a life coach or business coach, writing books, doing public speaking, starting a podcast, maybe working in a more traditional employment situation or a full-time remote job to pick up newer or better skills. I felt to an extent like I had tapped out what I could really do with SEO writing. I'd done it and it was great and I've enjoyed doing it. And there are several clients where it's still enough of a challenge and interest for me to continue doing it. But I could tell that wasn't what I wanted to be spending the bulk of my time doing. So I come to you with this podcast episode because everything is very much still in motion and in flux, but I wanted to help you recognize that you always have the ability and the permission, for goodness sakes, grant it to yourself, to change things in your business if it's not working for you. I will still be freelancing. I will still be making a great income from freelancing, but I'm actually setting my freelance business up to reflect more of what it looked like when I first started, back when I had a full-time job and was a grad student doing other things, so that I can fold in some other things and fold in some more downtime and get my dissertation done, etc. So, I just wanted to sort of do this preliminary episode to talk a little about that. I will come back in a couple of months to talk to you more about how this transition has worked out. But I hope that this episode has been helpful for you to see the many different ways that you can, alter your life and your business to make sure that it suits where you're at right now. It is not dishonoring what you've built. It is not viewing your current business as a failure. But if you feel disconnected and if you feel like there's something more out there for you, I really encourage you to make the mindset work mandatory, because no one can answer that question for you. This came up with one of my coaching clients recently where she's like, I don't know what I want to do, but it's not freelancing. Like she was just like, I don't think I want to freelance at all. Right. And that's valuable information to know, even when you're working with a freelancing coach. So then our conversations really shifted towards how do we start you building the life you love, working towards the goals that you want, knowing that freelancing might just be something that bridges the gap. It might just be something that opens another door for you. So I hope this episode has been helpful for you. Please send any questions or concerns to info